Oh, hi. Welcome to Aquata Zoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about change management. We've talked about change in various ways in the past. This one I'm just going to address as change that's needed for large groups or whole organizations, how challenging it can be, what are the steps to get there, what can you do to help maintain your success, and that sort of thing. So, about change itself. Sometimes it is very necessary. As much as I personally struggle with change sometimes because I need time and understanding. I need to wrap my head around it and all that kind of stuff. So I have been read as resistant to change before because I ask a billion questions because I want to have a good understanding of what's going on. So that being the case, I understand when people are a little interpreted to be as a little bit resistant to change because I have also been interpreted that way. But change is necessary. Change can be good. Change can be bad, but change for an organization is necessary to maintain success. The example that I always hear about when it comes to not successfully managing change is Blockbuster and Netflix. Okay, so if you're in the US and you were in the US in the 90s and early 2000s, Blockbuster was king. It was a place where you could go, usually on a Friday night, and you go rent movies and games and whatever to take back home and, enjoy, and then you return it. There was, at that time, early 2000s, I would say, a point where there was a change on the horizon, right? The technology was shifting and things were starting to look like it was going to be more streaming services that were going to be the way to consume that type of content, movies and games and things like that. Just doing so online from the comfort of your home, right? And Blockbuster and Netflix were kind of going head to head a little bit. Netflix was also participating in the rental business, but they were doing it by mail. So you would just send DVDs back and forth in the mail. And then Netflix opted to go for the streaming portion where Blockbuster did not. Blockbuster said, we're doing well, we have what we need, we're very successful, we're going to keep doing what we do well. In some cases, that's good, but you're taking a gamble. Netflix shifted what they were doing, and now in 2025, Netflix is huge and Blockbuster is gone. And it's just because there was a need for change or change on the horizon. Society was changing, the technology was changing, but the business had decided to not change in response to that. And that led kind of to their demise in the end. And so that's what we're talking about here. You have to change to keep up and make sure that you're kind of modern and innovative. And so change is necessary to stay in business and still be successful. A lot of businesses build their businesses in a niche, like they're what was needed at that time. The pandemic is a great example of a lot of businesses that, adopted what they were doing or built their businesses in that time and have since suffered or struggled or whatever because everything changed really, really quickly in a span of 5 to 6 years, right? So there are businesses that were able to keep up with that and change with the times. There were other businesses that could not. So that's the sort of change I'm talking about here. Whatever you need to do to, refine your processes, your business, your procedures, all those things so that you keep up with technology changes and societal changes and, just changing times and all that stuff so that you're still relevant and you're still successful. So that's why we need to kind of embrace change a little bit. Sure, you can go down with the sinking ship if you really want to, but it's painful. And, your most talented people are going to recognize what's going on and they'll probably change for themselves. If the business is not willing to change, they will induce the change themselves and they will move on to other things and other organizations. I know the zoo and aquarium world best, so my best example of this kind of shift is social media. We just talked about social media and how it helps to change and shift and inform and all of these good and bad things can be attributed to social media. We have instant connectivity to each other as individuals and to organizations. Like, you can talk directly to a company through social media. And so perceptions play a part and opinions play a part. For the zoo and aquarium industry, there's been a lot of shift towards conservation and education and being transparent about your business practices. People care about animals. They want to make sure that they're cared for well. And so institutions that are doing so well are encouraged to be more transparent, a lot of the time using social media, so that people can see what's going on. They don't have to question if animals are being hit behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Like something like that. We wouldn't do that. But but there's a perception of, like, for example, like old circuses of, decades and decades past didn't always treat animals very well. And so people now want to make sure that modern zoos and aquariums are not abusing any animals or withholding food or anything like that. So that's what we're talking about. That is a change that has been, I would say, partially fueled by us wanting the change and partially fueled by society changing their opinions largely. So zoos and aquariums are trying to change what they're doing based on technology that's available, social perception, all these different things. And we just want to do better. We want to do more. We want to make sure that we're doing right by the animals that we have in our facilities, as well as the animals that they represent in their, environment, in their habitat in the wild, right? So let's talk about when we need to change. So as things are shifting around us, our businesses, whatever they are, it doesn't have to be a zoo or aquarium, when we recognize that something is going wrong, either within our business or within the industry, we have to be aware of that at the very least and investigate our own operations for potential issues, as well as keep an eye on and be ready to change based on what's happening around us. Like, we as individuals and we as organizations are not in a vacuum. There are things happening around us. There are other similar organizations. There are ones that compete. There are ones that support. There's all these different factors happening independently of us, right? There are only certain things we can control, and we're talking about the things that are mostly outside of our control at the moment that we start kind of investigating, right? So it depends on what type of issue we're looking at here. Externally, we're kind of monitoring. And then we have these discussions about what we're seeing in the industry, in the economy, that sort of thing, that we may need to come up with a plan for, right? So pandemic is a great example. That one kind of sprung up on us a little bit aggressively and in a surprise kind of manner. And so there were a lot of discussions over how do we respond to this? What do we need to do? We didn't really know what to do. We'd never been through anything like that before. So it's understandable that most organizations didn't know what to do and didn't necessarily have a plan. So we were making it up as we went, and everyone was doing that. So that's fine. But we had to be very aware of what the situation was, what the dangers were. How do we protect our guests? How do we protect our staff? How do we protect everybody? There was a lot of change happening that was kind of forced upon us because of external things that we could not control. But that provided us a lot of framework for discussion about how do we handle the unknown? How do we predict what's going on here? What are the steps we need to take to implement change? And so, even though we're many years out at this point, it's still a good thing to look back on and remember how scary it could be, B, how necessary it was, and see how you all handled it at the time. Another type of change that might be needed is an internal change. Like, if there's something going wrong, if there's toxic leadership in your organization, if there's been a shift in leadership, which requires, examination of what's going on and revamping of processes and procedures and stuff, that kind of stuff is kind of within your control, but it's something that you need to talk about and really get an idea of where we are right now and where we want to be. So a little bit of a gap assessment about how we're going to get from point A to point B successfully. This is where we're at right now. This is where we dream of being. How do we get there? What are the steps that we take to get there? And so that's another discussion revolving around change. That one's a little bit more easily controlled, but it does require a lot of buy-in and just discussion and plan making and all these other things in order to implement it successfully. In either case, whether the need for change is from external components or if it's from within the organization, theoretically, a CEO, a president, a director could come in and say, we're doing this differently starting today. They're within their ability to do that technically. Do I expect that that would be a successful change? No, I do not. Ultimately, change is a group activity. Whether the CEO demands it or not, this is something that everybody has to kind of go along with if it's going to stick, if that makes sense. So that's why I suggest that there be a good amount of discussion and kind of hammering out the details so that everybody is on the same page. We all understand how this is going to happen and why this is going to happen, and that it makes it a little bit easier to gain some buy-in with the people from the top to the bottom of the organization, right? So even the people that are kind of interacting directly with the customers, or your lowest rung maybe of people down to the very people turning wrenches or cleaning floors or whatever, are able to understand the change and why, and they're willing to do so and come along with you for this journey. Sure, if I'm the CEO, I can say we're making this change right now, get on board or get out, but that's going to cause a lot of problems. People are not going to understand why I said that. They're not going to understand what the end goal is. I've given zero information about what I see for the future of the organization, or I've given no indication that I care about how hard that change is going to be, and that I don't care for the people that are involved and that sort of thing. So making this statement, yes, if I were the CEO or the director or the president or whatever, yeah, I would be within my realm of responsibility, and it would be theoretically okay for me to initiate a change in that way. A kind of authoritarian kind of directive type of mandate, I guess. That style is possible. Is it going to be successful? Most likely not, because the people that are working with me trying to implement this change, I have just given the directive, right? The people who actually need to do it are kind of lost and not sure how they're supposed to do it, and not sure why they're doing it, and not sure if they're going the right direction, because all I did was say this one sentence. I didn't really give any more information than that, and they're scrambling to try and get it done maybe without having the relevant background information, etc., to make the change happen. Now, for me, from this theoretical director standpoint, I've been thinking about this, right? I've been aware of what's going on, whether it was internally or externally. I'm sick of it. We're just going to do it. And it's just easier if I take the reins and I say, make the change, right? They don't know, they being the people that are supposed to implement the change and do what I'm saying, they don't know how long I've been thinking about it. They don't know all the pros and cons that I laid out for myself without their input. They don't know why or exactly how I want this done. I've been thinking about it this whole time. I came up with my statement, I gave it to them, and I said, go. And so they are left scrambling, trying to figure out what I mean, how they're going to do it, and what kind of timeline we're working on, how they're going to try and convince their people, their teams to get on board and do it. Like, it just puts undue pressure if you're not involving all of these people in the discussion from the get-go. A likely more effective way for me to implement change, if I'm the director and I have made my mind up that we need to address something, is to talk to my team about it. Talk to everyone about it. Make this discussion point a regular part of communications to the team and to the organization, to invite input, to invite criticism, to invite ideas, so that we have a good wealth and breadth of thoughts on the issue, as well as I'm becoming more aware of the challenges posed by me just mandating that we make a change, right? So I've got a lot of input from the people that are dealing with the customers directly, all the way up to, the high level senior management folks that I deal with on a daily basis. So having everybody's input and everybody's thoughts and give them many different ways to provide those. Not everyone's going to be super comfortable busting into my office as the director and talking to me about this change they see coming on the horizon and why they think it's silly or unnecessary or whatever descriptor you want to use. By having regular discussions about this, that kind of cements for everyone that change is being considered, that change will always be considered, that it's just part of what we do, and that they can mentally prepare themselves for inevitable change. Now, it gives them the opportunity to be a part of the change, which anything that you invite people to be a part of and that they can help build with you, they're more likely to accept and want to do it well. So it's not just a mandate that's coming at me. It's more of a thing that I helped build, so I want to make sure it succeeds. So incorporating change into the conversation at every meeting or in every communication helps to cement the fact that change is coming, even if it hasn't for many, many years. Just know that we're talking about it, we're thinking about it, we invite your input, we invite your criticism, we invite your feedback, and we want to make this a change that benefits as many people as we can benefit, and that is less inconvenient than it could be if I just said go, and just kind of cements the change or the upcoming change or change in general as a piece of what we do. This is how we are as an organization. We're incorporating change on a regular basis. When it comes to implementing a specific change based on external factors or internal factors, it's also good to break the change down into steps or pieces, things that are a little bit easier to accomplish and things that people have a little bit easier time wrapping their mind around. So we're not going to go directly from point A to point B, making a huge shift and not considering all of the structural changes that will need to be made and, different technology or technology applied in a different manner that's going to need to be done. Like, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. So it's best to delay it a little bit by planning and just breaking it down into smaller pieces so that it's a little bit more digestible. We can handle one thing at a time rather than a single person's job completely changing in functionality and throwing them for an entirely crazy loop. Not understanding what their new job is on top of trying to implement this change that baffles them. Like, that's an entirely unnecessary level of stress. So breaking things down into pieces makes this a little bit easier. I'll try to give an example. So I'm at an organization where we cross-train all of our front of house employees. So all the people that are directly dealing with guests. That means that they know how to do the educational pieces, they know how to do admissions, they know how to do retail, etc. Like, they know how to rotate through all of these different positions. They know all of that work. We did that on purpose to make people a little bit more flexible and make it so that when we have a very small workforce, which we do, if people call out or are unable to work in certain areas, like, we have people that are able to step into their positions and everything still moves smoothly and is still good for the customer experience overall, right? So when we decided to change the way our admissions area works so that you're not necessarily buying a ticket from a person at the counter, we wanted it to be a little bit more self-service, where you can pick what you want from a kiosk and choose your tickets and options from there. So you can do it online, you can do it in person, but really you're kind of in charge as the guest of your own ticket purchasing and experience that way. Some people like it that way, some people don't, right? So given that we had already put ourselves in good position because we cross-trained all of our people working front of house area, it was not a big deal when we took one of those positions away and left just kind of one person at our admissions area instead of two on a normal basis. We'll change it based on the need and the crowd level, but generally there would be only one person instead of two. While we could have had people lose their jobs, that is not what happened. We just moved them elsewhere. And so we had more people in the areas for educational purposes, right? We were able to have a little bit more flexibility with moving people around because we didn't need so many people in admissions. Now, the person who's in admissions now is kind of in charge of helping people. If they can or don't want to use the kiosks, they still have the option of talking to a person and having them help them through the ticket buying process. So if they have any questions, they have a physical person there that they can ask. But this has made things pretty easy and pretty simple, and it was a big change, but it wasn't as impactful as one would imagine. And by that I mean on the staff, not necessarily the guests. It helped the guests too. Some people just like dealing with the kiosks and choosing their options without having to deal with people, and that's totally fine. They have the option. And then there's other people who still want to deal with a person, who want to talk to people, ask questions. They still have that option as well. It's just, it changed the dynamic in our admissions area, so it actually goes faster, so people can just choose what they want and go, or they can take some time and talk to a person, and that's fine as well. But the people who don't want to do that can move on past, you know what I mean? So it made it so that we can get more people in and get them in to see the animals a little bit quicker, and that benefited us quite a bit, but it did not negatively impact the staff nearly as much. Yes, there was a learning curve with using this new kiosk technology. We hadn't had it before, but in the end, it worked out well. We're getting guests through. The kiosk was not that hard to understand. Things are moving, and ultimately that was a good change that benefited our numbers overall and therefore benefited the business. But we had started long ago cross-training all those front of house people for all of these different positions, knowing that at some point we're going to need to have to move these people around a little bit more than we are currently. So if we had dedicated mission staff like we used to a long time ago before COVID, then we would have had people lose their jobs. But given that we had everyone cross-trained so that they could work in the educational areas, they could work in retail, they can, wander around the aquarium and just talk to guests and provide good guest experience, we had a little bit more flexibility for that. Then no one lost their job, and it was a change that everybody was like, okay making. Incorporating the kiosk wasn't nearly as hard because we had prepared for that ahead of time. So we had broken everything down into steps. So first we cross-trained people to make sure that everyone keeps their job and is flexible. Then we brought in this new technology, and we kind of half used that, half used our older technology so that everybody was still comfortable in making the transition. Then once everybody got really familiar with the kiosks, we pulled out the older technology, and that worked out just fine. And so there's still a person there available if anybody wants to talk and ask questions, but the majority of our guests just choose their tickets and move on with their lives. And that's okay, because we can get them right into the aquarium. They can start looking at the animals and learning things and talking with the staff that has now been positioned in the aquarium to help them answer questions and educate them about what we do and what's going on. We easily could have said, we're starting the kiosks right now, and we could have gone that route and made it very jarring for everyone. We could have lost admission staff and made people upset that way as well. Nobody wants to see their coworkers lose their jobs, right? We do what we can whenever we can to make sure that everybody stays employed, but it makes it so that we need to train more skills so that people were a little bit more flexible, and that's good for them too. So they can say, I was hired for admissions, but I actually worked retail, I worked education, and they can take those experiences with them to whatever job they go to next, whether it's internal or with another organization. And it also worked in our benefit with our guests because, yes, we had less people at admissions to help them, but at the same time, the people who were comfortable with technology could just go ahead and use it and figure out what they wanted to do with the kiosk, ask questions as they need to, because there is still a person right there, but they just get to what they wanted to do faster. It takes one minute off the time that it takes them to check in. Like it's much faster, get things moving. You don't have to wait in line as long. You just get in there, see the cool animals and what they're doing, ask your questions of the staff that are now positioned in the aquarium that are more able to field your questions and tell you about what's going on and all that fun stuff. So it helped with our overall guest experience, which then benefits the bottom line and then benefits the animals, all of that stuff. It's all tied together. So it was a necessary change because a lot of places are moving towards, self-service as far as buying tickets and ordering food and all that kind of stuff. We're keeping up with the expectations of what's happening when you visit an institution. And so we wanted to incorporate the technology so we could stay relevant and provide good customer service. So we were able to accomplish both those things at the same time. I think one of the most important parts of change management is the communication that happens during and after the change. So yes, communication up front so you understand why the change is happening is really important, but the conversations and communication that you have during and after the change are just as important. You need to have a good feedback loop of what's going on so that people, as they're running into obstacles and challenges, they have a way to inform the leadership of what's going on so the leadership can either react and remove the obstacles that are happening, or they can kind of file it away maybe for next time. Like sometimes when you're in the middle of a change, you just got to push through and do the best you can with what you have. But communicating about it during and after that change makes it a little bit easier to avoid the same issue the next time you try to implement a change. So even if you can't do anything about it right now, we're already in the middle of it, push through. We will address it at the end so we can figure out how to avoid this kind of thing in the future. So next time when you're implementing that type of change or something similar, then you have kind of a roadmap of how you got from where you were to where you are now. And then you can use that as the roadmap for the next change that you make. So oh, we got stuck right here. There were a lot of problems in this time frame or with this step in the process. So we need to keep an eye on that and see what we can figure out to avoid that this time around. Having constructive feedback about how the change went after the fact is really helpful to build trust, A, keep the change going, B, and just make sure that everybody's kind of okay with what's going on at this point. Are we where we thought we were? Is there more that we need to change? Have we uncovered something else that is a problem? This all of this is a process. It does not happen overnight. It takes some time, and we are all kind of in this change system together, but in different viewpoints. And having different experiences with it. If I'm the CEO and I say make the change, that's pretty much all I have to do. I'm just waiting to hear what feedback about what happened. I'm not in the trenches trying to figure out how this change is actually supposed to work and why we're having such problems. It could be I say that we want this change, but our suppliers and our vendors, our service providers are not able to make that change with us because they're external. They have their own agenda that they need to attend to, and they can't even help us. And so that is a problem that I should consider for next time at the very least. And try and maybe I, as the CEO, since I made this mandate, maybe I contact those vendors specifically. Maybe I get in touch with our suppliers to make sure that they can provide, even if it's not on the timeline that we want, a reasonable timeline for the future. And so creating that feedback loop helps for the future changes and helps make sure that the changes kind of stick, because you'll have an idea of what went well, what didn't go well, what we can do in the future, what we shouldn't do in the future. And now with change in the communications and in the discussions as regular parts of what we do, people will expect that we're going to do more change, right? And now we have a good setup for how we implement change so that everybody's kind of considered, everybody has a voice, everybody's free to give feedback so that we make it more and more successful the more that we implement change. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions about that or any other leadership or management things or zoo and aquarium stuff, you know where to find me. You can write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget you can follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay. Thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.